we online?
Weekend mode on. We're live. Hey.
Weekend mode on.
Hello. Weekend mode on. Actually, not yet. We just need 1 hour, right?
Yeah. It's the transition to the weekend.
It's in the transition to the weekend. So welcome to another show of 302 of a kind with Kevin Indick and myself, Alex. We're really excited to redirect you into the weekend and just like smoothly get into the weekend vibes. So just redirecting you via 302 temporarily to the weekend. So next week you can get back. But we got a lot nice of interesting stuff that we wanted to talk about, and we'll share those insights with you today. So Kevin, how is it going?
How's it going? Jet lagged. Just got back from the US this morning. Back in Germany now. So forgive me today if I'm not mentally as on as I usually never am. But it's good to be back. And I brought the rain. I thought about this because you and I were texting about the fact that wherever I go, it rains. And I thought I'll give myself the nickname Rainmaker, but like the literal sense, not figuratively.
Yeah, I was just curious, like this would be like one of the most interesting studies that people may conduct within the SEO industry. Is there an impact of Kevin Indick being in a place and the rain that's happening around you? And I mean, I'm pretty pale as well, but no tans whatsoever.
It's a ranking factor for sure. It's one of the strongest ranking factors for rain is my presence. Pretty clear. Hey, Dragon.
Rain factor. Hey, what's up? Cool to have you here. And we're seeing people coming into the show. That's really great. So this will be actually the last show, 302 of a kind with us two. Next week, Marcus will be back. So we will start off on the Monday show with Daily Dose of SEO on Monday at noon European time. Excited about this to get all the heads up that Marcus actually missed and all the updates that he's going to have starting on Monday. And obviously next Friday, then it will be you and Marcus again. So this just as a disclaimer at the beginning, and it's pretty like housekeeping rules. Like we're Germans, we need our rules, we need our structure. Otherwise, we'll just fall into problems, and therefore that's probably the best way to move forward, right?
Yes. Very orderly.
You also love your structures and your orders.
I do. I have, there's a protocol for everything. There's rules. There's rules for the rules. It's the only way to live. How else can you live?
Yeah. I mean, we even have a standardization for SEO nowadays, the Dean for SEO. I forgot the number, but also if it makes sense or not, we're going to discuss this maybe another time, maybe after a couple of beers, but it is available. So just being curious about these things. So that's interesting. But so we got 1 hour to fill. We got a couple of topics we wanted to talk about. So let me just quickly share my screen. So technical SEOs having technical difficulties. If they're able to share the screen, let's see if that's working. Yes, it's working.
There we go. So
we can directly start away. And I mean, what would be the show without a Google update? We have seen a couple of things that are changing so far. So I think probably the most important update happening at this point in time. But also, to be honest, it was just 2 days ago when the rollout was announced. So still a bit early to have any things to derive from here. Or do you have your first insight that you have been seeing so far?
Not yet, unfortunately. But I was curious, did you see anything during the last spam update? I saw some big changes.
I actually haven't seen them right away, but I was also a little bit in some customer projects involved directly. So I usually when those updates happen, I just know, okay, they are available. I'm waiting a little bit because something can go up and down during those updates. So I'm just like don't want to shoot the gun and jump the gun. And therefore, I'm just a little bit patient in this kind of pace. But obviously, we have to be aware. And what would have been the show without announcing that has been an announcement?
Yeah, important. So during the last spam update, I think it was October last year. I might be wrong here, but I saw a lot of bigger sites lose ranks, and I think it was more related to backlinks, right? So for me, I think spam updates, there's always a question, okay, is this actually spam, or is this redefining what's now spam? You know what I mean? Like, is it actually about spammers because Google says they catch so many and they do so many things all the time about spammers. So I'm not sure if the spam update is actually about spam. I think it's much more about things that used to be gray and now they're actually defined spam, like certain link building tactics, for example. And so I often see sites that are very aggressive about link building losing ranks during spam updates. And I think that's intentional. I think Google is just getting so much better at understanding spammy link networks or aggressive tactics.
Yeah, I can definitely agree on that. And curious to see how this will evolve and what's going to happen. So stay tuned, and probably already in the next week we might have additional information regarding this. But for now, it's just being patient to see what's going on and if there's a new definition of spam. Maybe dynamic rendering will be a spam tactic at some time in time.
Maybe it should be.
From this position. But also speaking of announcement, I think you spoiled this already last week a little bit, but I think the documents haven't been rolled out at this point in time. But now we know that also AI mode is coming to additional countries. Unfortunately, you have been traveling to a country which isn't involved as far as I know. But at least you have been in a country where the AI mode has been available. So we see Google continuing to roll out this process, and it's definitely worthwhile. So keeping the update here going on. But I think this is actually like a limbo situation where both of our predictions are kind of true, because I think the week before we talked, I think 2 weeks ago, we talked about this, when AI mode will be rolled out to additional countries. And sort of, I've been right, because it was like just about to be September when new countries are actually introduced to. But you're also kind of right, because the country we live in, Germany, doesn't have AI mode yet.
Yeah, same rollout strategy as last time. I think they did the same thing. First US, and then maybe UK or Canada, and then 180 countries, and then the EU. It makes sense, right? Every tech company is now very hesitant to expand to the EU because of legislation and regulation. But this is interesting, less so because it's more available in more countries, but I think the sub announcements are more interesting, like the agentic capabilities here. It's only restaurant reservations, which, to be fair, right, Google had some AI for a while. We probably remember Google I/O from a couple of years ago, where they demoed the phone call from AI that made a restaurant reservation. Everybody was like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Took a much longer time to roll out. But what I find interesting here is Project Mariner. So Mariner is Google's, it's a code name for Google's agent mode, agentic mode. And that now sweeps more into AI mode. And so it seems like when I look at ChatGPT and Claude and some other competitors, Google really is on par in terms of timing to roll out agentic capabilities. And my kind of prediction or question is for that to come into Chrome, so that you can, similar to how Anthropic just launched a Claude and Chrome extension where you can do agentic capabilities in Chrome. I think the same will Google will kind of try to do the same thing and then bring more of those agentic capabilities to Chrome.
I think it's like, it kind of feels like the next logical step, to be honest. If I just got access to Comet from Perplexity, I thought it was kind of interesting, even though maybe it has a couple of features where I was like, okay, maybe I don't need them that often, and I don't know how much power I want to give this browser over my life. So I'm still very cautious, to be honest. I'm still a bit scared of where it could go wrong. And what I heard, there are some parts where it might go south. And by the way, I forgot to say hello to Hans at this point. Great to have you here. Congratulations of having a new owner of Chef Koch, which is now the Funke company. It was just announced today, as far as I've seen. So congratulations to that. We're looking forward to this. And so I thought it was really interesting to see, and also some cool features that I've heard about that I haven't tried yet, is that you can use it in order to do some things in 2 different tabs at the same time and ask the agent to work on these kind of things. So for instance, if you got a random recipe page, let's call it Chef Koch, just out of sake at this point, and you've got next to you an online shopping page where you could buy the groceries, you could actually ask it to say, pick up the products from this one page and put it into the basket of your other page. So you don't need to do this manually. So I think there are a couple of cool features that you can actually use it for. But I don't know if I want to add my credit card data and credentials into these kind of browsers. I'm still very cautious, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's why the browser is so powerful, because that's where credit card data lives. And sure, when you start a new browser, you're more hesitant, but imagine like Chrome launches that tomorrow. I think most people would be too lazy to remove or like to restrict access, or maybe they would, I don't know, like restrict at the beginning and then try later on. But I think as soon as agents prove or show that they're trustworthy, if they ever are, and that they're reliable, I think then the sentiment changes a little bit. But I'm curious, like, what were the features that in common? Because I haven't tried it yet. Like, what are the features you like and that you don't like?
So actually, I just got a couple of days ago, and I haven't played around too much with it. Especially like this shopping idea, something that I think is kind of like an interesting use case, as well as also navigating to certain pages or trying to book certain things. Again, I'm still very hesitant on how to use it. On the other hand, kind of like comprehending and just getting some extractions of long articles is something that I think is quite interesting. So there is, for instance, this this Google Doc, this Apple paper that was released a couple of months ago about the to have it open somewhere. Actually, I do.
Illusion of
I just
thinking.
have here the illusion of thinking. And rather than to read 30 pages with everything, so like get a quick understanding, comprehending what it actually is about. But to be honest, this is also something we already had with Notebook LM, with all of the other systems in place. So now it's just natively in the browser, and I don't need to copy paste the URL. But still, it's kind of interesting with what you can use it for. So I'm thinking about like how to use it, and maybe in a couple of weeks' time for the daily dose of SEO, I could ask it to order my my tabs in a direction, so I have everything in a very good storyline that is actually applicable to present this information. And then in the end, it actually is supposed to copy out all of those different URLs into a Google Doc. So I don't need to do this manually to share it afterwards in the world of books, where you can obviously always get the access to the links we're looking to.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I also like the fact that agents are much better at like opening web pages and consuming them. Seems like they're also struggling less with JavaScript, etc. So, yeah, I'm generally like, I made a bold prediction in my annual predictions for this year. I said that we'll see 100 million people use an agent, and I'm torn, like, because you could say that deep research is also an agent, but I think like what was probably meant is more like shopping agents, reservation agents, right? These types of transactions. And let's see. I still have a couple months left, but time is getting pretty tight. I'm not yet sure if we have the killer agent that everybody loves yet.
Yeah, so interesting that you say this, because it actually falls directly into your prediction and what you said at the beginning, that especially the AI mode from Mariner is something you think is interesting. So it kind of fills into the same direction. Something that I thought was really interesting, and maybe also some advertisement in my own area. So I have done a webinar this week with my wonderful colleagues. One was Miriam Gissier. It was really lovely, as well as also with Gerald Murphy. It was about also how do we do technical SEO for Gen AI, which I think is very becoming more and more important nowadays. Everybody's allowed to also register and have a quick video and looking at this, so feel free to access it. It was really interesting. And what Miriam said on the webinar was that actually she believes that agents are behaving a little bit like drunken babies nowadays. We got a couple of comments around this with bad parenting advices, so we just wanted to make sure no kids have been filled up with alcohol at this point. It was just the behavior that we were talking about. And I kind of get where she's coming from with all of those different directions that we have seen so far. So sometimes they just struggle with very easy stuff. And also here, what we've been seeing, in my opinion at least, and I don't know if you see anything else happening with your own observations, that even though we have complexity and very powerful technology at hand, they sometimes struggle with like easiest tasks or seemingly easiest task at the beginning. And sometimes you don't know what they actually fall for, what the problem might be. So there might be some challenges that we're seeing around the world. So it's really hard to also trust them 100%.
Yep, 100%. You're absolutely right. I always test them by giving them some of my work tasks and then see how they do. For example, I asked ChatGPT agent to compare a landing page of one of my clients against their competitors. And I didn't specify the competitors. I just said, like, go to landing page, read it, blah, 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 and then see who the competitors are and compare their key landing pages. And ChatGPT agent failed during the first step of just opening the landing page. And I don't know why. It just said, take over. And then I took over and I just scrolled up and down. I gave the control back to the agent and then it executed the task really, really well. But somehow it got stuck there. And so you're absolutely right. I'm not even sure if it's drunk babies or just drunk interns. Yeah, exactly. Drunk interns. Because, when they're capable, they're very capable. But here and there, they just fall over and face plants.
Yeah, and this kind of maybe we can just advance it a little bit, because actually one of the videos that we shared within the session, and we obviously don't need to watch through this whole thing, but so what I actually asked ChatGPT at this point, especially with the agent mode, and for some reason it's not loading. So let me just quickly see if I can get it to load in a second. Yeah, there we have it. Let me just speed it up a little bit. So if you check out the website, the homepage from United Airlines is actually completely in need of rendered JavaScript. If you don't have JS activated, this is how the page looks like. So I think this is really important to mention at this point in time. So we've been seeing for a very long time, and many people saying throughout the web, LLMs are not able and capable of rendering JavaScript. And suddenly you say, okay, you've got different tasks that you want the LLM to do or the agent to do for you. So how does it actually behave? And therefore I wanted just to quickly test to actually see the agent fail miserably. So in the end, I have just a very easy prompt asking it to go to the website and book a flight within the next week or next month to tell me what's happening and to just book me the cheapest flight. And suddenly you can see this within here that it's actually really capable of rendering the JavaScript, because otherwise it wouldn't have actually access to this. So I was really, really interested on how far it could get, because it also had to define like what was the cheapest day to get this flight as one way. Don't worry, I don't want to stay in the US. I just didn't want it to taste it. But this was actually something that we can do within here to see how this actually is going. And Hans has actually asked if we have already tested this with the comment browser. Actually, I very much tried this in the beginning to get some insights there. And it just opened the page and it did not do anything else. So maybe there was some other things going off at this point. And also here, it just failed at some random point and it just didn't continue at this part. So I also asked it to take it over at some certain area. And then I was actually really impressed of the capabilities that we're able to do within here. So I was really like in a virtual machine that I could work for. So I could actually do everything that I wanted to do. And also, and that was even more impressive, I could surf the web through the virtual machine within the chat agent. So I was able to open new tabs and just surf random websites. And I didn't want to see how far I could get. But you can really see that I just opened just completely other websites and surfed them at this point. For instance, to identify what my IP range would be and if this actually changed from the IP range that I was actually located from at this point.
Huh. Yeah, it's fascinating. I also wonder how much that costs in computing. No wonder that ChatGPT limits how many agent calls you can perform in a month.
Yeah. But let's see how those like what kind of shenanigans there will come up with these kind of things, because there's definitely some possibilities so people will start exploiting these kind of things, in my opinion, on the one hand side. And also like, you can really like navigate and start asking different things. But as you said, like probably drunken interns is probably the best idea. If you're very precise on what you want it to do, and you can give it probably really, really stupid tasks that are really annoying to be done, and it will probably do them quite easily. And if you just have a bad prompt, it just fails miserably at some of these parts.
Yeah. That's also interesting. You mentioned the security challenges or risks. because Claude in Chrome is only limited to 1,000 users. I think it's like Claude Max users or Claude Pro users or some I don't know. People who pay a lot of money, they draft 1,000 of those, and they do that because of security concerns, right? So they in the announcement, Anthropic very clearly states that there are prompt injection and abuse threats that can come from these agents, and so I'm very curious to see, like how will this be used for good and how will this be used for bad?
Yeah. Let's just say it might be possible, but not what the capabilities are, not to give anybody some ideas. But what I think is still fascinating me is that we have like this two different layers at this point. So we have the possibility, and I would say this is like a very clear proof that we're now able actually here to actually render JavaScript. And then on the other hand, you see studies where people said, well, actually ChatGPT is not able to render JavaScript. And you can really see within the log files how actually the behavior changed as soon as server-side rendering was actually deactivated from one day to another. So I think it's really interesting how these two different worlds are now colliding at this point. And maybe as an SEO and a technical guy, like, what should we do now?
Yeah, what should we do? What I would love to see from this chart, and again, it's great that Frank is sharing this out. Something that I'd love to see is kind of what user agent was this, right? Which of the three user agents was it? Because if it's just training data, then maybe it doesn't need JavaScript. Maybe I might revert that statement. If it's the agent that sends that's being used for RAG for reasoning, might be a little trickier, right? Like that's probably the agent you want to make sure can render JavaScript even better. So, but yeah, the reality is that it's the same with classical SEO, right? Like there is this one reality that Google tries to paint where they understand all of JavaScript and it's not a problem at all. And then there's the actual reality where whenever you make these changes, and you see a pretty strong impact. And so I'm working with another big company right now, and it's the exact same thing. They are very heavy-handed on JavaScript, especially client-side rendering, and we're restructuring that right now. I'm pretty confident about the results. I'll keep you posted, but I have a pretty strong hunch because I've seen it so many times before.
Yeah. And if we go back to the example of United Airlines, so what I actually did there is, and we don't have any connection, so I just thought I wanted to see a public website that everybody probably knows to see what we have. And I created 4 different ways on how to access the website with different setups. So normal Chrome browser without JavaScript being rendered, so no disabled JavaScript. Then I switched the user agent to Googlebot, and then actually I also looked at it from the from the featured snippet testing tool, or structured data testing tool, to see actually like how would Google really see it. And 4 times I looked at the website, and 4 times I got a different result. And it kind of like really puts us into perspective, and something we've been talking about last week already, where you can really say that we have to be aware that there's not any more one player we should consider in this world. We have to consider those multiple different users and system. And maybe Riot has been pioneering the term website user experience for quite some time. Maybe the new term would be website agent experience in the near future. So we need to check out how can we make a website being easily accessible by different agents, and therefore how they would behave either through this virtual machine or even just this websites scraping the content from us.
Yeah. It's funny because if you're, like penalized by Google, then all of a sudden there's some other ways to potentially get some traffic or business. I don't know, but Google obviously is still by far the most important one. But you're absolutely right. This has become a very democratized or meritocratized kind of world.
Yeah, kind of interesting. And I think we haven't spoken about it. So there's actually an article that's a little bit older by Glenn Gabe, but I still like the way on how he actually says that we actually need to make sure that the most important parts are available as easy as possible. And I like really his approach on how to get to this. So it's been actually published already on the 11th of August, but actually I think it never made the show unfortunately, because I think it's an important piece and something that is like always really easy also to show internally to colleagues to say like, no, we have to have everything client rendered. And here we can really see what actually the lefts out are. On the one hand side, also, I still really love his arguments why he wants to have something like a ChatGPT console, such a search console by ChatGPT or anybody else, and really just proving this point that it's important to have these kind of things. But then also, what are the different systems, and just have it very clearly which agents are able to actually render it and which aren't. And we can see it's actually just the minority at this point.
No, it's Google. And is it because Google has, I mean, Gemini, sorry, has access to Google's index, or like, like I wonder how much of an advantage does Gemini have because of web crawling and rendering that Google has been doing for all these years, and I'm pretty sure it's a big advantage. So I don't know. It's interesting in many ways, because also I don't know if we have this in the news. So I don't want to spoil it, but you know what? I'm going to be quiet. I think we have the news. So I'm going to be quiet for now. I hold my breath.
Okay, now I'm just curious if maybe I've missed it and we forget to talk about it. Maybe just give me a quick hint. I can jump to it.
Okay. What's the source that OpenAI is actually using for Google results?
Yes. So actually, that's exactly the same.
Huh.
The next point. So actually, perfect transition, to be honest.
I had a feeling.
As we Germans like to say, zwei dumme ein Gedanke. Ein Gedanke. Yeah, but I think it's kind of interesting, and that this news actually came out. In this case, it's from The Information. I should have opened it directly, maybe in the whole article. But it's kind of interesting that we can see that that actually Google or ChatGPT or OpenAI has been using an API in order to feed its data from Google's ranking. And actually, something that we've seen also, like if you open Google directly and you deactivate JavaScript rendering, you get a very polite message telling you, "Can you please activate JavaScript?" And depending on your browser, this is how you do it in Chrome, this is how you do it in Firefox, this is how to do it in Safari, this is how to do it in Edge. So very polite, nudging the users to activate JavaScript. And by implication, if you see, okay, we have seen previously ChatGPT isn't, or those LLMs aren't able to render the code, and I would doubt that they actually use the agent mode in order to access SERPs, because that would be really, really much resources being spent just to grasp on some results. And that was actually like a huge puzzle at this point in time, and that was kind of like very easily answered, because we found out. And I just have quickly this answer from Tom's guide. Actually, very cool way on how to destroy a website through ads. Let me quickly reload that one. And we have a screenshot where we can see, maybe it's a little bit down the line, or where was it? Didn't I have a screenshot in here? Where they were even showing the, actually it's gone, or maybe maybe it was another source, but they had the screenshot from the page where we're able to see how OpenAI was used as a source, as a reference customer.
Yeah. I saw that too. And I spoke to some people, and apparently some people knew this for like since the beginning, that ChatGPT or OpenAI is using SERP API, that's a provider, as the preferred way to access Google. And so a couple of things, right? One, I see all these headlines that are saying, oh, ChatGPT has been using Google all along. And it's, I think, a very strong misstatement about what's actually going on, right? Like ChatGPT is not using only Google. What we have been seeing is that ChatGPT is using also Google in some cases. In a lot of cases, it's when you're not indexed on Bing. So I think it's like, I'm so annoyed by this, because it gives the illusion that you should really just care about Google to be visible in ChatGPT. And I think that's a very bad idea. I think you'd be hyper aware of Bing, and ranking is one thing, but indexing is critical, right? And so I have, I see more and more cases where a customer is not present on ChatGPT because they're not indexed in Bing, and at the same time, their content was taken by some of these like news aggregators or web aggregators, these spammy sites on the web that Google hopefully with the August spam update now finally destroys. And they rank with their content in ChatGPT, right? So anyway, one thing, I think Google ChatGPT's use of Google is very selective, right? In a lot of cases, it's still Bing. And Ahrefs, actually, I think last week we looked at that. Ahrefs had an analysis where they looked at hundreds of thousands of keyword examples or prompt examples, and they found that only in like 10 or less % did the URL that was shown by ChatGPT as a source actually rank in the top 10 on Google, right? So I would be really careful with this whole kind of thinking that ChatGPT is now using only Google. And the other thing that's interesting is when you ask yourself how that works behind the scenes, does that mean that like for every new prompt or query, better said, synthetic query, that ChatGPT would fire an API request to SERP API? And if so, would that then explain why a lot of times, you have this like very progressive way of ChatGPT accessing the URL, where at first it looks at the string of the URL, is that relevant, and then at the snippet, and then the title, and then it might grab the full content. So anyway, I think it's very interesting. It also sounds like it costs a lot.
And theoretically, we would have this process before that's saying, okay, so first we're firing a request to Bing, seeing if the results are not just really valid or nothing really proper comes back, then going back and then going to SERP API and then doing what you've just been saying to see if everything's being done and seeing, and I'm just like riding on this horse regarding JavaScript and don't know what we're missing out on at this point. So I think it's really interesting. By the way, also Marcus says hello from China today. So good to have you. It must be late in China now, so good to have you still online on a Friday evening. Really happy to have you here at this point. Yeah, so it's really interesting kind of what kind of different versions are coming up right there.
Yeah.
Great. So moving on, and I think it's like there's always like a couple of things moving around within the scenery. Is like to have, should we have an LLM TXT or not? Big question nowadays. Should we make sure our most important content is like always available without JavaScript? Probably. And what does it look like with to schema or not to schema? Should we have structured data or not on our websites for the LLMs? I think Dan made a really cool analysis there. And obviously this is only an experiment. And on this single experiment, he found, and I think this is really good, for the too long didn't read, I don't see any evidence of the schema even reaching the model. So I think it's kind of interesting to have this kind of information, and it kind of puts it in perspective, show structure really all the things for the LLMs, which is a little bit counterintuitive because I think like the biggest systems that would profit from the data are like these LLMs. If we know, okay, this is already the structured information, this is already what we have, and therefore we know the web is very, very diverse with different information styles, with different system styles, and now we've got like a couple of structured versions how to put information into a part. I know it's limited, but kind of give some guidance. And we kind of see, and I don't know if you've seen something different, but maybe unless you're an e-commerce player, there's not too much correlation about how important this really is for the users. So it's kind of, look, you would have had data that might be pretty easy for you to train information upon, but you still decide to ignore it and to focus on other things.
Yeah, I think it's a general misunderstanding of how LLMs work, because LLMs don't need annotations of the code, right? Structured data is, or better said, schema is an annotation, a glossary of the code, of what are the objects and what are the relationships, and LLMs don't need that, right? They just need the raw tokens, just the text, and they can build the relationships themselves. They don't need the annotations like a search engine might. So I don't know. I was always skeptical about schema. I've never seen like a big impact. Then I have seen some reports of people saying it had an impact, but I don't see this straight line. Like, I don't think there's consensus about schema making an impact for AI. And even for SEO, to be honest, I'm still pretty skeptical with a few exceptions, but I never prioritize schema that highly. but I might be wrong. I always open to be wrong. Alex, are you a big schema fan for SEO? Have you seen good results?
I think as a German who likes structure, you can anticipate that there's some kind of a joy of seeing structured data at this point. And if I studied information science, and I remember when we were told about intelligent systems and the way on how that's actually working. We had very cool courses about these topics, on how this can be really, really interesting. I always had this idea of Google being something like a library, which like the university library, where all of the books you would need to write your master's thesis or these kind of things. And you compare Google to this analogy pretty easily with a little bit of extra things. One would be you don't have only books, you've got documents, and documents come in all different forms and shapes. And also the content of those books or those documents actually update on a irregular way. So you don't know when something is updated. So these were like two big challenges. And also new documents will be put into this library even without the owner of the library actually knowing about this. And to have something like structured data gives some very good guidance that we can actually use in order to train those models. But it always seems to be some technology that just helps in order those systems to learn about them. And therefore it's not like the end game or the end state at this position. It's just like a bridge technology, as I could say it at this point. And we know that maybe Hans has a very clear opinion that for structured data with recipes, obviously I give you that. I give you that 100%. And there are also additional of other things where I would also argue that this being, but like seeing the power of having the structured information, and also, and this is something that also Jonah has mentioned a couple of times, that combining structured data. So to have these not only single information points, but really set them up in a way that they actually are connected between each other. This is like where you have a big power, how you can derive information from parts that are being put onto the website, but actually never written down somewhere. So my favorite example is you've got a recipe blog and you want to know which recipe is actually vegetarian, or maybe you've got a nut allergy, and you can see just by the ingredients, because they're not by any animals, maybe any animals or containing nuts, that a product is actually vegetarian, or that you might be cautious by if you have these allergic reactions. So there's really cool need, but obviously moving along in the near future, I think this might not be necessary anymore.
Yeah, totally. Agree. Recipes, some e-commerce, I mean, all e-commerce, some more than less. Sure, like schema still makes a difference here, right? But when we're talking outside of these industries, I think there's probably very little to be gained from schema. And I agree with you. It's interesting because, on the one hand, yes, I understand that we help train Google to like understand better kind of what some of the structured data is. And I will also say at the same time, it's a little bit of a mismatch between what Google pretends how good they are and what's, like if you have to tell them, oh, this is a different product and has different size and price. Anyway, too philosophical at this point, but I think this is a good experiment.
Friday.
Yeah, it's drifting off to the weekend too quickly. But another good experiment from Dan, and I really want or would love somebody to come up with more aggregate data. I will also say there is a big trap in analyzing schema and aggregate data, which is that just because a page uses a certain schema, it's still hard to differentiate whether an element of the page makes a difference or the actual schema. And so I would love to see more large-scale tests, and also want to be very cautious of this trap in testing.
That's true. I mean, I also see from Johann von Hösen a couple of examples where they had some very positive examples of being shown up for apartments within in Google. So I think there are always some examples, but especially also these maybe also things which maybe aren't connected. This might be something that's really interesting. So let's see how this goes and what we will be optimizing in a few years' time. But I know that also Hans once shared this example with the drunken, I think, what's this test being called? Like this drunken person who searches his key under lamp. I need to double check what the name is. And a policeman comes by and asks what he's doing. He's like, yeah, I lost my keys. I'm searching for it. And they search like under the lamp, under the street lamp, the keys. And just like after a while, they haven't found the keys. And then the policeman's like, are you sure you lost them here? And he's like, no, I'm not sure, but where else I won't find them. I wouldn't be able to see this. So it's like what you've been saying, or actually I would like to apply this to what you've been saying. It's like this, if we're looking just in this area, then we might find things that are where it's relevant. Or where it's actually not relevant, but we just try to find some kind of connection, even though it might not be there.
Yeah, looking at the obvious areas. Yeah, classical
long
bias.
Story short, classical bias problem. Yeah, I need to double check what it was. So moving on, and Metian, who actually commented last week on our part, and also will be joining Munich's SEO Oktoberfest in a couple of weeks, did some analyses regarding ChatGPT search and has found a couple of interesting configuration files so far, and also talked about to us what his findings were. I think that's really, so first of all, really impressive what Metian has been doing so far. I think that's really cool, coming up very often with innovative things, not just as I'm just talking about these things that we've been seeing online over and spamming the world with different opinions, but really going into the intel, what has been seeing so far, and double checking, for instance, also re-ranking models. And this kind of like reminds me of Twiddlers so far. Would you agree at the same thing, that we have, like, we've got the system in our brain where we have two different modules working, like this think quick and think slow model. Now here we've got something where we have two models. One's like comparable to the A scorer, and then something where we have some re-ranking processes. What is your take on what you've been seeing so far with this part?
I think Twitter is a great comparison. And I also think that re-ranking is one of the most interesting processes happening on the LLM side, because they obviously ground their answers very deeply in search engine search results. These results are already ranked, right? Ranked and re-ranked and maybe re-ranked. And so now you get these results and you match them against a kind of initial draft of a response. And so then you re-rank them again. And the question is, what is the cake mix, the recipe that ChatGPT uses to re-rank results from Bing and maybe Google, right? And so that's where they draw heavily, of course, on the user behavior that they're seeing and the prompt that they're seeing, which is usually much longer than the common query that people use on search engines, right? And so yes, it's quite fascinating. What you already see here, like freshness is one of the big kind of re-ranking factors. It makes sense to me also because as an LLM, you have your training data, which is up to date to a certain point in time, and then you have the most up to date data, and you basically want to rely on your training data as much as possible, right? So one of the first things the system does is to look, okay, is this like actually fresh content, or maybe I already have an answer to that in my training data, I don't need it anymore. And then obviously query intent, I mean, it makes a ton of sense. And as I mentioned before, prompts are very long on LLMs, right? They're very rich in detail and context and information. And so it only makes sense that, when ChatGPT does the query fan out with synthetic queries, gets back all the answers, that it then uses its own understanding of intent from all the rich context in the prompt to then re-rank all the sources that it gets from search engines, or maybe from its own training data as well. So anyway, what do you think was the most interesting finding?
So actually, I think especially what you just said at the beginning is like this reconsideration, or this pattern that we have, this re-ranking functionality. So we got a big amount of results, and then we decided to re-sort them in any kind of way at this point. And now I just said like this brain functionalities where you also have like a quick working guide and then this long-term thing. And I don't know, I see this pattern now everywhere. On your computer, you've got like the hard drive, then you got the RAM. On your brain, you've got like those two areas. Now here you've got two areas working with each other. I don't know. It's like if this is just like me seeing too much commonalities in something, and maybe also here, maybe more sometimes the alcohol speaking or philosophical way of speaking. But there seems to be something really interesting in for everything to have like these two-way street at this point. And there was also a presentation by Hans where he also compared this with a Formula One race, where you have first part the qualifying at the beginning. So you need to make yourself eligible to be found in general, how Google's working. And then that's the part one where you need to, which is most of the time probably binary. So either you have the correct content or not, either you're indexable or not. Maybe content is being addressable by LLMs or not. And then you actually have the real race, which is like the second part that you're seeing at this point. And this kind of pattern is like coming up over and over again. And apparently nobody really talked about this just a couple of years ago. And now it's like one of the most important parts. And we can also think about it, like, is this like a process of overfitting or underfitting in this position? Like, do we have some relevance problems? Is this something which we haven't been thinking about previously? So I thought that's something maybe we need to address a little stronger, but apparently it seems to come up over and over again. At least that's my take from it.
Interesting. I also like the term slurm. I think slurm is here you go. Okay. Hans adds to the conversation.
Yeah, so re-ranks and filters source based on quality using its systems knowledge and RLHF trainings. I think that's always really interesting. It's similar to the EEAT concept, but not programmed, rather than emerged ability learned through patterns. Would you agree that, or?
Man, my jet lag brain still tries to comprehend Hans' answer here. I mean, look, like it makes sense that ChatGPT has its own quality systems, and that's also why I say that I don't expect traditional SEO to be sufficient for AEO or GEO or whatever you want to call it in the long term. I think for now, yes, that makes perfect sense. But in the long term, these systems develop their own flavors, their own preferences, right? And that's why it's so important to keep reverse engineering and monitoring, because you don't want to kind of fall behind with an outdated playbook. So anyway, I think this is highly interesting, and Metehan just keeps finding these nuggets. I don't know what the guy is doing all day, but he whatever he does, it's super insightful, and it's great that he's sharing it.
And we're really interested to meet him in person, to be honest.
Yes.
To see what's been going on at this point. And obviously here, I think this is something that I think is quite an interesting take from this. And there's another pretty interesting guy that I've seen a couple of times on the internet speaking on different webinars, being very prominent nowadays. Interestingly, I don't know, maybe you've met him, but he moved to Germany quite some time ago. And he also talked a little bit about what we can do and for how we can actually adapt our strategy at this point. Maybe you can give us a little bit of insights on this article.
What's the slurm?
What?
Anyway, so I wrote this guest article for Wix, contribution about adapting your content strategy. And when you scroll a bit further down, I think I'm making like a very similar point to what I've just made. You know, it's like there's obviously differences between search engines and LLMs. Sure, we're all aware of it. A lot of it is still the same, and I would not say that, you know, there's clearly not 100% overlap today, right? So there's another question is, if there's 90% overlap, what are the 10% that are not overlapping? And a couple of things, obviously easy answers, right? Anything that the LLM can answer out of their training data or without citing sources doesn't really make sense to write about anymore, unless you have a crazy edge or you can like really create something that is so much better than everyone else, which 99% of companies are not able to do. So scratch easy answers. The other thing is adding something new to the conversation. So for a long time, companies were able to drive organic traffic by basically just creating a slightly longer, slightly better version of the guide, or like the ultimate guide to blah blah blah, right? That's kind of the common format. But now you need to think about addition. Essentially, in your content strategy, you need to think about what are all the topics and insights and knowledge that is already commoditized, that is already out there, that's already known, and what is unknown, what is something new that I can contribute, right? So you almost want to think about, like, what is the share of insights per words in your content that is net new? Not easy to get to, but if you don't have something to add that is valuable to the conversation about a topic, then the content is not valuable anymore. The third point is about, obviously, like monitoring.
Let's just quickly stay on that, because I think that's even interesting, because I'm totally with you, but I think maybe also to add something could be maybe the same text, just shorter. So I think maybe we just like something that we can look at. Maybe we can a little bit be more precise on how we're actually presenting the results, which sometimes would work and sometimes actually doesn't. Like if you want to want to explain, I don't know, it's like very like atomic physics or something like this, it's really hard to shorten that probably. But if you have like some possibilities to make it really like very precise, concise, this could be like a value add. And I do guess like you have to add something, but it doesn't necessarily have to be long context or something like this. You can also think about how can you shorten certain parts, which is pretty hard, to be honest, because like LLMs could do something like this already. But I think this might be a very tough way to go forward, and just also some angle that might be worth looking at.
Yeah. I mean, if you're able to express something, in a way that saves probably human brains 10 hoops, then I think you have something there. And you're right also that you compete against the LLMs for sure. So anyway, not to do too much time on this. Monitoring is super critical, right? Like, again, this is a different way that people engage with LLMs. So you need to be 100% aware of what they're doing, or as aware as you can of what they're doing and how they engage. And then the other thing is letting a user solve tasks on site. So when you still get traffic, which becomes harder and harder these days, then ideally users perform an action on your website. So
recapture.
Yeah, that's one action. I more so had in mind, things that allow people to progress in the user journey. So content is always a way to like learn how to do something, but letting people do the thing is even more powerful. And so wherever you can do that with calculators, templates, workflows, you want to
doom
do
scrolling.
that. Doom scrolling, always good. And the last thing is,
I think like just like something I thought was really interesting on LinkedIn is like they start to have games on LinkedIn, and I don't know. It's like I think that's like really off. Like you're in your work time, you just like quickly need to check up something, maybe write somebody a message or something like that. And then it says like, oh, do you want to play a game right here, just to prolong the time you're actually on there? It's kind of like weird how this is being introduced at this point. I know it's a little bit off topic, but I thought it kind of works in here. I thought it's an interesting move to have some measurements.
that was one of the most German things he ever said. Just go ahead and look something. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, with LinkedIn, I think it's all about engagements, right? So they're obviously a social network. They're not a pure career platform anymore, and I think they know that. That's also why they lean heavily into video and games and stuff. I agree. I don't like the games. I never play them on LinkedIn. I haven't played it a single time, but I don't know. I think it's a distraction, and it just makes the product seem more less serious, And that's a good transition, because the last thing that I recommend is like build modes outside of search, right? So direct traffic, strong brand traffic, communities, having maybe unique voices or unique subject matter experts in your content, like all these things add to the house that you're building, that is that is trust with your users, which can very quickly fall apart. But I think that's one of the most important things to keep in mind with LLMs, because if you don't forget like how personalized LLMs are becoming. And if you trust a brand and you communicate that to an LLM, it will be very hard for you to break out, meaning for the LLM to recommend you other products.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's really good way to move forward. And I thought it really fitted to what Metan said previously, that we can actually also address here, to take these points into account on a regular basis, and don't have any games like LinkedIn to defer maybe your. It kind of seems needy, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just, there's this interesting situation that happened many years ago when Steve Jobs, when I think it was Phil Knight, founder of Nike, who invited Steve Jobs to one of his Nike stores, right? And he asked him for his opinion about the store, right? What should he do? How can he make it better? And Steve Jobs said, get rid of all the shit, right? Get rid of all the shit, all the unnecessary stuff, right? Like focus on the core product, Nike shoes, forget about all the other stuff, right? Like the side products that just distract, that just make the main product look expensive. And I think LinkedIn needs to get rid of all this shit.
Okay. So product advice for LinkedIn at this point.
For free.
So let's do a hard cut. I mean, we kind of like have another quick fire round, and this is like some kind of things I thought might be interesting. So on the one hand side, Miriam actually asked Googlers, in this case Martin Split, to give us some insights on what would be actually good attributes for crawlers, and especially also because we have been talking about perplexity, ignoring robots TXTs, having a stealth mode on. I think it's kind of good to have some kind of a way on what are things to be actually quite interesting to think about. So obviously support HTTP2, I think that's fine. Identify you as a user agent, which kind of contradicts what we've seen previously. But also respect the robots TXT. And actually, I think this is kind of like an interesting one, because what we also have seen that if you want to be found as a friendly bot for Cloudflare, you actually really have to also respect the robots TXT, which is a little bit contradicting to SEO tool providers, because maybe as an SEO, I want to see actually what's behind the robots TXT. So it's kind of interesting how this might be evolving, but obviously for standard crawling, I would absolutely expect the tools to respect the robots TXT at this point. Obviously being friendly to slow down if we're doing some problems with the servers, making sure that we have actually caching directory, and also try reasonably if something fails for some part in time.
Yeah, you should tell that to Perplexity.
We can post them underneath that and say, hey, here you go, take it.
Tag.
But I think the mode is a bit different. And then also the public service announcement, because I think it's just interesting that that Grok 2.5 is now also available as an open source module. So if you wanted to test it out, try a little bit more, you can actually work with that as an open source. I'm actually, to be honest, a bit cautious and also curious at the same time how this actually works, because we know there's some things a little bit off, something where we need to be a little bit more sensitive about using, in this case, maybe also Grok. And now it's going to be available. And I don't see if that might, like, for humanity, if this might be the best move that has happened so far. Do you have any ideas on that?
I think Grok is not the best thing that happened for humanity so far. heavily biased. A friend of mine and I hope it's okay that I steal this joke, but we were comparing LLMs to rappers, and we said that ChatGPT clearly is Drake, right? Because super successful, like, all the spotlight. And then Gemini is probably Kendrick Lamar, probably like technically better than Drake, but not as successful. And then Grok is Kanye West.
Okay, that's good. And actually, he also added that Grok 3 will be made open source in a couple. And I think something to always have in the back of our heads, and this is like, for me, also important thing at this point. Like, if you make it available open source, it's out there, you can't take it back. So especially like with all of like its flaws, with everything, like even if they decide to say, okay, maybe it was a mistake, theoretically people have it already on their computers and you can do whatever they want with that. I think this could also be something very dangerous and actually ties to the whole discussion. Should those things, those LLMs, be actually open source or not? And I'm a little bit cautious about this, and I don't know on a general matter if this is a good idea or not.
Yes.
And just to sum everything up, I thought this is just something we definitely have to show, since we have seen something similar happen to ChatGPT recently, where searches have been actually shared online and they were indexed. And now we can see the same thing with Quark things. So I think this just adds to the conversation on a general level, what we've been seeing so far.
Yep. What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? Let's put it that way. And I think with that, actually, we had covered most important stuff that we wanted today, and we're just on 1 hour, so I think we're just making it in time.
Boom.
And we're happy to send you off temporarily to the weekend. Wish you a very great time, and hope to see you again on Monday with the Daily Dose of SEO. And with that, I would say happy optimizing, happy weekend, and enjoy your drinks. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.